Hey everybody, Larry Lawton here. I got a great video for you. I'm going to sit down with a good friend of mine who did federal time in a minimum security prison, and we're going to ask him some questions, and then I'm going to answer the same questions. So I think this is going to be pretty good. So I want you to check it out. But before you do, check us out on YouTube member programs, Patreon. Make sure you check my book out, Gangster Redemption. Check out the Crooked Diamond Cigar. It's really going well. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Check this video out.
Income tax evasion, 2005. The evasion occurred in 1994, 95, and 96.
I went to prison for what they call Hobbs Act robbery, which is under the RICO Act, Racketeering Influence Corruption Organization, by way of robberies, which was jewelry store robberies. I was affiliated with the Gambino crime family, and I ended up going away under the RICO Act. And that's why I was in federal prison. Normally, a jewelry robbery is not a federal offense because it's just a jewelry robbery. It's not like a bank, which is insured. Jewelry robberies are just a regular robbery. Like if you robbed a McDonald's. In McDonald's, it's not a federal offense, but because the McDonald's gets its French fries from Idaho, they can make it federal by interfering with interstate commerce. So that's why I went away.
I spent 4 months in federal prison / camp with no probation.
On this charge, I was sentenced to 144 months in prison. Sounds like, okay, got 144 months? That's not bad. Add it up. That's 12 years. 144 months equals 12 years. And I ended up doing 144 months 4 times. They ran it concurrent, which means they ran them together. So I had 4 144-month sentences run concurrent. The difference is, if they ran it consecutive, I would have had to do 12, another 12, and 12, but they ran them concurrent.
Living conditions were remarkably unexpected, in which we had 300 federal inmates in a dorm type of setting, in which we were on an Air Force base in Alabama with no gates, no bars. The only requirement we had is we just could not cross the street within the Air Force Base boundaries, which was a couple of thousand acres. We had a golf course, we had a tennis, we had racquetball, we had I played softball for the Air Force softball team. All right. We basically had everything you wanted to have on the outside. The government came after me for about $600,000 to $700,000 in unpaid taxes. I spent about $1 million fighting the government over a 10-year period, thinking that that was not the case. The threshold to send me to prison was $15,000. They found me guilty for $15,681. All right. The minimum sentence at that time was going to be 6 months with a year probation. The judge, my federal judge, actually admonished the federal government for saying this should have never come to trial. It was not a felony type of thing. It should have been civil, right? And he departed my sentence. In other words, he went out of the statutes that the government calls for and departed my sentence to 4 months with no probation because he believed that it should not have been a criminal case. Regardless of prison time, whether or not a federal camp is really sort of a gift that the government gives you, right? It's really a gift, right? I play tennis every day. I golfed. I took tennis lessons. I played racquetball, right? I never had the threat of of anybody trying to rape me or anybody trying to take advantage of me, right? But the negative about prison is you're taken away from your family. And that's a price you don't want to pay, right? I left 2 kids at home and a wife at home, and they suffered dearly. Although I didn't suffer. I did not suffer. I had a good 4 months, right? And that's something that those 4 months my family has paid for. Did I pay for them? Not really. Nobody knew that we were federal inmates because we all wore Army fatigues. So we blended into all the service guys on the base. So we were treated as not as criminals. We were treated as military personnel.
The living conditions in the prisons I was in were horrific. I was in one prison where the windows, they have little windows, a very little window, and they were broke. And so you would feel the winter come right through the window. Literally, you would be shivering, begging for a blanket. You're shivering on a bunk, literally shivering, and waiting for a blanket. And when you're screaming, I need a blanket, I need a blanket. Not easy. And in the summertime, you would get naked in your cell, because I don't give a frig if my penis is flipping around. I was so hot that if you wore underwear, you would sweat and your underwear would become wet. So the living conditions in federal prisons I was in maximum security prison, were horrific. Now, that's more of an extreme. The regular living conditions could be really bad. I was in one prison where they put 3 men to a cell. 3 men to a cell. That means that one person is either living on the floor, or at one point they actually built the bunks to go 3 men high. That became illegal when I was in prison due to federal lawsuits. And when that became illegal, they had to take them out because it's inhumane conditions. There's actually a law stating how much square footage a federal inmate is to have to be considered not under the 8th Amendment, which is cruel and unusual punishment. So they violated that law a lot, and I had to live the way I lived. Depending on the prison, I was in new prisons, which, they're really new, but they have 0 workout equipment, 0 pull-up bars. And then I was in older prisons, like Atlanta, where they had rats run over you. Literally, I tried to catch a rat as a pet. So that there's a difference in the prisons you're in. That's what prison's about.
Well, there are a number of jobs that you could have had. The number one job that everybody gets naturally is you have to maintain the gardening, which would include mowing the lawns of all the military personnel, mowing the lawn of the golf course, working in the kitchen. Those are the jobs. Any job that they needed to have done on a base, we took care of those jobs. A host at the hotel. We had a Hilton Hotel. All right. We were hosts. We were doormen. We were people to pick up bags and carry bags to rooms. All right. So it was any job that was available on the base, we were able to do. They were getting free labor, basically, the base. And that's what it was all about.
Every prisoner is supposed to work in federal prison. That is by their policy. You can go to the yard and they consider that a work, and you get $5.25 a month. They also have in prison what they call Unicor. Now, Unicor is the prison industries. I never got to work in prison industries because I didn't wanna. That's slave wages at its fucking core. But my jobs were normally to either be what they call a unit orderly, is one. I was also worked in the kitchen. When I first went to prison in Atlanta, United States Penitentiary, Atlanta, I worked with all the gangsters. The gangsters got jobs in the kitchen. So we worked in the kitchen, and our job literally was filling napkin holders. They have napkin holders. So you'd fill the napkin holders, but you had to be there at 5 a.m. I think they had call at 4:30 a.m. because the prison starts feeding at 6 a.m. So you had to be there. That's the prison where I saw Ben, the fucking most famous rat in the country, because we called him Big Ben. He literally put his paws up on a chair. And this is a fucking rat. They call him paws. That was a rough prison. That was one of my jobs. I also worked in what they call the East Yard in Atlanta. Now, the East Yard was a place where you walk around with a broom and a pan where you pick up garbage. It's like on a stick. Well, I got that job on purpose because I used to help people smuggle things through metal detectors. We had a lot of metal detectors on the yard in Atlanta. So they had one coming off the yard. Then they had another door in the rack, and they had one at the beginning of the units. So everybody had to go through these metal detectors to get to their unit. Well, when you're carrying things like shanks or something, or even illegal drugs, I got to know you, and I'd be walking around sweeping stuff up. And then what would happen is they'd know me, and they'd say, Lawton, it's over there in the corner. And I would pick up their drugs or their shank, and I'd just put it in my little thing. Now, I got to know the guards, so I didn't have to walk through the metal detectors. Obviously, you got a pooper scooper, whatever they call them today. And I would walk around it. Now, they're busy. They're running people through the metal detector. It goes off. Get out of line. Go over there. Now, those person who went over there, they're strip searching. They're dropping their pants, lifting their nuts, spinning around, making sure they don't have anything on them. And they'd say, hey, get out of here. They don't know if you have a bullet in you or if you have a fake knee or something of that nature. They say, get out of here. Now, meanwhile, Lawton is working East Yard. I would throw their drugs. I'd pick it up. And, you know, they're in these things that swivel on the back of a pooper screw. I don't know how to describe it. And trash pickup thing. I don't know. And I'd be walking around. They know me. In the middle of the move, it's very quiet. So I get to talk to the guards and stuff. And they had multiple. At one metal detector, they would have 4 or 5 guards. That's what they did. That's what we do. That was my job.
Most of the prisoners were mid to high level corporate executives. I'd say about 80% of us were white collar people, doctors, lawyers, CEOs, COOs of various corporations. About 10% were, I'd say about 10% were African Americans, usually mid to low level drug dealers that were involved in the prison.
I was in prison with murderers, drug dealers, hitmen, mafia bosses. I was in prisons, maximum security prisons. I remember walking the yard with Nicky Scarfo, who was the head of the Philly mob. Vic Arena was the head and tried to there was a big war in New York in the 90s, and he was fighting for power over the Colombo crime family. I was also dealing with the Genovese crime family. So I dealt with the bosses of these family, and I also dealt with people like Willie Falcone. Willie Falcone is known, and he is out, the biggest drug dealer in the world. Willie Falcone was part of Sal Magluto, Willie Falcone, the 2 biggest drug dealers in the world. There were 2 Cubans in South Florida, and they were working with the Colombian drug cartel. So you're dealing with hitmen, mafia bosses, and straight killers. I watched a man stab another man and kill him over a cigarette case. Literally over a cigarette case. You don't sleep you don't sleep. You're in your cell, and you better sometimes be careful. Because I know one cellmate that killed another by putting a shank through his heart. That's the kind of people I was with.
Strangely, the biggest fear was being transferred to a maximum or mid-security prison And the one that was closest to us was Atlanta, which was a prison that nobody in the country wanted to go to. It was condemned. It was violent. There were murders occurring every day. And that was a threat that you had on a daily basis. That if you step out of line, right? And there were no rules basically living there. The only rule was just don't cross the street. We had no bars and we had no gates. Just don't cross the street, all right? Or violate, do something that's overtly violent. You were able to maintain your place within that federal domicile.
The biggest fear I had of being locked up still has to be my family, losing my family. Obviously, as a man who'd been to prison before that and touched Rikers Island and other places, I knew the street game. That didn't fear me. But don't get me wrong. When you walk into a federal prison and the maximum security prisons, I remember I was in Lewisburg prison and we're getting transferred. My first official prison was going to be at USP Atlanta. And this is in 1998. I was arrested in 1996. In 1997, I ended up going to USP Atlanta. So late 1997, I'm at Lewisburg and they're transferring me from my prison. The guard looks at his sheet and says, "Man, what did you do?" I go, "What are you talking about?" "You're going to Atlanta." "Okay." He goes, No, this is Lewisburg, another penitentiary. Said Atlanta is the worst prison in the system. There's killings going on out there and you're a white person? Because not only were the inmate population very high African American, the guards were mostly all African American. Didn't mean to me, but black versus white and the crap that goes on in prison. I really thought about that for the whole plane ride to Oklahoma, which was the holdover, back to Atlanta. So you go from the prison you're in, you go to Oklahoma. It's called FTC Oklahoma, Federal Transportation Center, Oklahoma. They literally have a prison at the airport. A literal prison at the airport. The plane pulls up like you're going to Kennedy Airport. You get off, go back. Well, they gave me what they call diesel therapy, which is they fly you around and drive you around on buses. And the whole time, I kept thinking how bad it was going to be in Atlanta. And it was worse than I even thought. But I got to Atlanta with a note for Vic Arena, who was a mob boss, and I actually suitcased that note the whole way. If you know anything about suitcasing, it's hiding something in your rectum. And if you don't know, just go to the playlist. I talk about it. And I suitcased the note to Vic Arena, and that pretty much saved my life. That's the kind of prison I was in, with the kind of people I was in.
There really wasn't many crazy things, with the exception of positive things, right? The craziest thing I can say is that, I didn't know the government anything afterwards. Probation, for instance. Probation was a year, some people's 2 years, 3 years. You serve a 2-year sentence, you may get a year or 2 years probation. The craziest thing is that people used to do their sentence and then have a year probation. And after they did their sentence, we'd have a party. Your sentence is over, you're going home. And then 2 weeks later, they'd be back. And why are you going to be back? Life was better here than it was on the outside doing probation. I'd rather do my probation on the inside than on the outside, because life was wonderful on the inside.
Craziest thing I saw while I was in federal prison was a person killing his cellmate for snoring. Literally killing his cellmate for snoring and going back to bed. And I dealt with this person very closely. I know this person. And I still to this day think of how crazy or mental are you to do something like, literally, there's two people in a bunk, guy gets out of his bunk, guy stabs him in the chest, kills him, goes back to bed. How fucked up are you? Obviously, I never want those people to get out and be living next to me or you or anybody out there. That's probably but maybe, and I'm going off the key, I watched The Man, and I heard the screams. Wow, look at this. I just got freaking goosebumps. This young man, and I talk about it in my video, got his anus cut from the top of his anus until his bottom, until his scrotum. And they found seminal fluids. These two guys took this young man. Now, I heard the screams. We were locked down during the screams. We didn't know what it was. And the next morning we got up, and this crime scene tape across his cell. We go at the table, and then one guy walks in and says, "You guys got to read this. Inmate," I'm not going to give his name, anus was cut with a sharp object from one point to the other. They named it. And seminal fluid was found. So two guys took a razor blade, cut a guy's asshole, and fucked him after that. If that doesn't make your fucking mind crazy, I don't know what will.
Well, I think that we had a Hilton Hotel on campus. You're mixing high-level corporate executives, incredible business acumen, with a lot of 10% street kids, right? They get together, and they were able to work out a situation in which they ran the largest prostitution ring in Alabama out of the Hilton Hotel on campus. And inmates took advantage of it, as did all the military personnel.
I hope you like that contrast between what Frank went through and what I went through. Frank was in a minimum security prison. I was in a maximum security prison. I think you're going to learn a lot. Please, don't think of our situations. Don't make bad choices. Make good choices. Don't go to prison. Check us out. We got a lot coming with the podcast, the cigar. We got a lot coming. Stay tuned, everybody, and have a great day, but make good choices.